The Man in the Dark. Written by Dipayan Chatterjee. Performance, audio production, and music by Clement. As she regained consciousness, Anneliese struggled to adjust her eyes to the darkness prevalent in the dimly lit room. The vile stench was so strong that it became extremely hard to breathe. As she had been losing her senses more frequently than before, it had become increasingly difficult for her to keep her memories intact. As far as she could remember, Anneliese was trapped in this dark, damp room since the last time she was conscious. As the buzzing inside her head started to die down, Anneliese realized where she was and what was going on. Her memories were now slowly coming back, bit by bit. Just as she felt the firmness of the slithering rope around her wrist, it became clear that she was still tied to the antique wood chair. Anneliese made a few futile attempts to get her hands free, but they were securely tied behind her back. She even tried to move the heavy chair with all her might, but she was too weak by now. It felt as if her entire body was breaking down due to the fever which gave her a terrible headache. Her head felt so heavy that she couldn't even afford to lift it up. She slowly licked her dry yet still pretty lips, but her dehydrated mouth failed to offer even a drop of saliva. Her parched throat felt as if 1,000 splinters were slowly needling inside her flesh. With squinted eyes, Anneliese finally lifted her head up and started to look around the dimly lit room. It was then that she saw the man in the dark, standing quietly in one corner, silently observing her every move. Although she couldn't see his face clearly due to the darkness, she realized who it was and why he was standing motionless in one corner of the room. She tried to speak up, but her dry mouth did not allow her to produce any audible words. Realizing that she had failed miserably to speak even a single word, Anneliese tried even harder, but only a gush of warm breath came out. Knowing what was about to happen now, tears started flowing down her heavy eyes, reminding her of the pain which she was about to feel. All this was undoubtedly too much for a 16-year-old girl to bear. She took a deep breath and finally spoke up.
Please. I can't take it anymore. I can't tolerate this pain anymore.
The man, dressed completely in black, stood still motionless in the corner of the room. Hearing her plea for mercy, the man in the dark felt an immense hatred inside his heart. He started to grind his teeth and tightened his jaw. His eyes focused on the feeble and weak Anneliese, who was tied to a wooden chair in the middle of the room. He clenched his fist, firmly grasping the small metal object in his hand.
Please let me go. I don't want to die. Please. I don't want to die like this.
Anneliese cried out. Her voice was so low that it appeared she was speaking only to herself. She felt so weak that it took all the strength inside her just to speak a few words, but she was determined to get out of her predicament. She slowly lifted her head and spoke again, but it only sounded like a loud whisper. After making another futile attempt at licking her dry lips, Anneliese cried out,
I beg you, please, let me go. Please, just leave me alone.
The man in the dark kept staring at Anneliese, trying hard to listen to the murmur. He slowly turned around and locked the door. He knew it was now time to do what he had to. Even though he had done this several times now, every time he felt the same nervousness that he felt the first time. His heart pounded fast. Sweat was starting to form up on his forehead. 100 things rushed inside his mind. He knew he had to get it right, as there was simply no scope for error. After all, it was a matter of life and death. He took a deep breath and relaxed his shoulders, but the nervousness was still there. His heart was pounding fast, but he was ready. Anneliese realized that it was time again. She would pray to God for help, but it appeared that God had abandoned her. As she tasted the salinity of the teardrops that rolled by her lips, she licked the corner of her lips in a desperate attempt to wet her dry mouth, but even that didn't seem to work. She was tired, weak, and exhausted beyond her limit, but she still had the will to live. Finding no other way out, Anneliese begged again.
I don't want to die here. Please, please. I want to live. I beg you, please, let me go. Please.
Never!
Suddenly, Anneliese screamed out in a deep, demonic voice. Her face instantly turned pale, and dark, thick blood began to ooze out of her mouth. A sinister smile formed on her lips as she turned her head at an odd angle. She looked straight at the man standing in the dark corner and screamed out loud, only this time the demonic voice was intolerably loud. The man started to cough as the vile stench of her breath suffocated him. She laughed dastardly at the man, and then suddenly stopped to cough out lumps of thick, dark, clogged blood. She stared deep into the eyes of the man and spoke in a coarse, crazed voice.
You think you can save her? No, she is mine now. I will never leave, even if this body rots to hell.
The man stood silently, taking deep breaths and trying to control his anxiety. The last thing he wanted to do was show fear. Finally, he stepped out of the corner and took out the Bible from his bag. The priest, dressed completely in black, was now ready to do what he had to. Even though he had performed several exorcisms, he still felt the same nervousness that he felt the first time. Hearing the incessant curses of the demon, the priest felt an immense hatred inside his heart. But he remained focused, clenching his fist and firmly grasping the small metal bottle that contained holy water. He took a deep breath and relaxed his shoulders. His heart was still pounding fast, but he couldn't afford to show even an ounce of fear. The priest slowly went and stood in front of the possessed Anneliese and spoke out confidently.
In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, I command you to leave this body!